Hi, I'm Katie, and this is a tutorial on giving your Santa a fabulous, fluffy, and sparkly beard with a thread called Fuzzy Stuff. I am going to demonstrate on a Prairie Schooler Santa today, as that's what I like to use these on, but you can really use this on anything where you've got a reasonably large area that you would like to be a little fuzzy, a little fluffy, and a little sparkly. This is a really fun thread, and I'm going to show you how to use it in this application as seen here on the holiday kit release of my Prairie Schooler Santa. What is used today, the Fuzzy Stuff and the number 22 chenille needle, are included in the kit, but if you're doing this on something else, what you need is a thread from Rainbow Gallery called Fuzzy Stuff. This is widely available at local needlework stores. Check with them. I use color FZ15 for my Santas. I think it just makes the perfect beard. You'll also need a number 22 chenille needle, so it's got a nice sharp point. Why you want that is going to become apparent quite quickly here. And then you also need a pair of scissors. I only use my best scissors for silk. This is a synthetic, so I'm going to be using my Apex scissors today. All materials will be linked in the description, but let's get started. There are a few things to consider with this, and we'll go through those as we go along. So we're going to start by cutting a long length of Fuzzy Stuff, really as long as you can manage, because this is quite a thread eater technique, but never work with a length that is longer than you can manage. If you're snarling your thread, that's not doing you any good. It's a lot better to start and stop regularly. So if we take a look at Fuzzy Stuff, you can see that it's kind of going in one direction. You want to imagine it pulling through in this direction so that you're not stripping the thread. That means I'm going to knot this end, and I've threaded the other end into my chenille needle. So just take a look when you cut your Fuzzy Stuff and imagine what's the smoothest direction it will pull through without stripping. And I'm demonstrating on this camera won't stay. Demonstrating on a Prairie Schooler Santa today. All details on this are in the description. And the first thing to know is at what stage am I doing this? So as you can see, my cross stitch is all done, my back stitch is done. This has been blocked. I don't know if you can see the holes there from blocking the fabric. And then I have ironed on my fusible interfacing. If you are using interfacing, make sure to do this before you add your fluffy beard. This is going to add a lot of bulk on the back, and you would not be able to get a clean bond on your interfacing trying to go over this. If you're not going to use interfacing, then that doesn't apply. I am also going to add some beads and embellishments to this guy, as I have done on my kit Santa, but those are going to come after the Fuzzy Stuff because I don't want to have my long lengths snagging on anything. The last thing to consider before we actually get started is directionality and how you're going to shape your beard. You're going to be using relatively long stitches here, as we'll see, and so you need to think about how those stitches will angle or not angle. This works well with larger blocks of stitching. It doesn't do well with very detailed shapes. So on my 2020 Santa, which is what I'm demonstrating on here, I've actually just smoothed out that edge, so I have something, just a perfect line there instead of all these little detailed bits, which would be very hard with this technique. I am going to be lightly angling here. I've heavily angled. You always want to work with the shape, so just imagine what's your direction. So take a look on there. My stitches are going like so. But if you were using a Prairie Schooler Santa, like say the 2024, in which that's straight on, your stitches would be fully horizontal. So consider the issue of shaping, and if your piece is particularly suited to it. If you are trying to do all of these detailed little lines, for example, on the Santa, that would not work as well, and you'll see why that is as I finally stop talking and start demonstrating. So this is not something you do all at once. You are going to build this up into a shape. So I'm going to start at the side of his face so I can establish the direction of my stitching, and I am going to take a nice long diagonal stitch right up into his hat. And then I'm going to come up next to that again from the side of the face, going into the hat. And I'm also going to add a few extra stitches just to pick up that little bit right there, and those are going to be straight. So you can also change direction a great deal, and you can come back and add in as many stitches as you need. So this one's lightly angled. And then I'm going to put in another straight stitch right here to pick up that bit right at the side of his face and pull it through. So that doesn't give very good coverage. What we're going to do is establish a base first and then come back and keep stitching over it to get until you get that really fluffy look seen on my finished Santa. You want to really build these stitches up, and that means staggering them. So the principle here is very similar to long and short stitch, and you're going to have stitches of staggered length. They don't have to be perfectly even, long, short, but if you just had a row of perfectly even stitches going into each other, they wouldn't look nearly as nice. So here I am going diagonally over about 3 stitches on my short. See right there. And then that's more like 5 on my long, but this is approximate. Don't count your beard, guys. This is just a matter of eyeballing it. And I'm also going to start slanting my stitches inward just a touch so that I can pick up the side of that beard. We're going to work all the way across the top first. And then start laying in the next row of stitches. I want to go a little longer there because this is coming down. And again, you can see my coverage here is not perfect. That's fine. This is all about layering and building up your texture. So if some of your stitches, especially in your first rows, are like kind of wonky, they're not even, they're not perfectly angled, don't worry about that at all. You're not going to see any one individual stitch in your finished piece here. So I'm adding enough stitches to go and pick up the side. I want to fully obscure all that white. I've got white understitching here, and if you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you do fully understitch your beard. You want a base to go over, but in the end, I don't actually want to see any of that. So I'm going to add one more stitch right here at the side. As you can see, I just came up right through the fuzzy stuff, splitting it. That's fine. You're going to be doing a whole lot of that with this technique, so get used to it now. So that's my first row of stitches in. They're wonky. That's fine. They're not giving full coverage. That's completely expected. You don't get that until you really start building up your texture. So now I'm going to come down and start my second row. and then I'm just going to go up and into my previous stitches. You don't come down at the base. You want to actually split in to the previous row of stitches. As I said, for those of you who are familiar with long and short stitch, this is basically just layered, fluffy, long and short stitch. So my pin pillow students, for example, will be really ahead of the game here. And then here, so I've got, this beard's a little interesting because it has this kind of half moon shaped curve. So I'm angling my stitches at the top. I'm gonna straighten them out a little bit for this section of the beard. And then I'm going to curve them in the opposite direction here at the bottom. That to me is the natural way to follow this shape. And as we saw in the first row, my direction isn't completely consistent across all parts of the top. We've got straight here, angled, 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 and then a sharper angle right at the end to pick up that little bit there. And being irregular is your friend here. So just take long stitches. Again, you want length. This doesn't look as effective if you try and just go over one stitch or two stitches. You just don't see enough of the thread that you're using. So you're going really, really long here, and remember that you're always going back in to your previous row of stitches. And as you build this up, you're going to get quite a lot of bulk on the back here, especially if you're using interfacing as I am. And that's why we're using the sharp chenille needle and not a blunt tapestry needle. It's going to help you put your stitches in as this gets bulkier and bulkier. That is also something to remember when you're thinking about using this on a piece. Is this something where your finish is going to be able to absorb a lot of bulk on the back? That works just fine for me with my Prairie School ornaments because I lightly pad them out. I use a layer of felt on a layer of mat board, and then that gives a lightly rounded finish. And then the felt on the back can easily absorb all the bulk that is just starting to build up, because we're going to do several more layers of stitching here until I get a nice, super fluffy beard. So, okay, and there I just took a straight stitch that is into a diagonal. That looks a little awkward. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, I don't care. That doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep on going because, as I said, this is all going to get really layered. We're going to have more rows of stitches on top of this. Is just our base, and you will not see any one individual stitch. So if you think you're at the end and you can still clearly see individual stitches, it means you haven't done enough. You want just pure fluffiness, and that's what this will give you. But you do have to get quite a lot of stitches in there to get to that point. So I'm continuing with my second row. I'm dropping stitches down as the shape drops down, keeping that irregular. It doesn't matter if these all meet at the same point. You just want to have long and staggered stitches, basically the point to remember here. So now I'm working around his face. I'm going to add an extra long stitch there. So you can see staggered. I'm just going to keep working across, come back up to the top of this beard. And then I'm going to pop in a diagonal just to cover out There's 2 stitches there where that meets his nose. Like so. And I think I'm gonna add another one. So basically with this technique, more is more. Add more stitches, add more fluff, add more everything. It will really benefit from that, and you'll see that as this develops. And then because I've come up here, I'm actually gonna reverse my stitch going up through so that I don't have a longer carry than I need on the back. And then I'm gonna come down. I'm now into my 3rd row. And now I'm going to revert to my usual pattern of stitches in which I go back up into it. If you are familiar with working in the opposite direction on long and short stitch, you can absolutely do that here. This isn't an essential point. This is just how I like to do it, which would be bottom up, or essentially the back stitch method of long and short stitch. So I'm starting my 3rd row. I'm just trying to pick up everything at the outside of this beard. And then I'm taking my stitches back in to the previous row and splitting them. And then I'm coming to the end of my thread. You can also go in between stitches in the previous row. So there I didn't actually split the thread. I just went in between 2 previous stitches. That works well too. This is pretty freeform. Do anything you want, just keep it layered, keep it staggered, and keep it long. Short stitches really just don't make the best use of fuzzy stuff, unfortunately. It'd be nice because sometimes on Prairie Schooler Santas, you have these little strips. In that case, you'd have to have long stitches going this direction, not those short little over 2. It's just not gonna look the same. Or at least that's been my experience with this so far. So I'm gonna come to this end of this thread, and then I'm gonna show you how I stop my thread. So that's my first length of fuzzy stuff worked, and now we're gonna flip it over to the back. You can see all of the bulk that's developing there on the back because, you know, essentially this is satin stitch, but staggered. So I'm just going to run it under the stitches in a couple of directions, making sure I'm getting a good bite of that texture to anchor it. And then clip. And I am going to start a new length. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work my entire base stitches off camera just because this would take forever, and then I'll come back to you and show you the 2nd layer. Okay, so I have completed my first or base layer of stitches there. As you can see, I have gone diagonal, straight, and then I have curved them back down to pick up this kind of half moon shape here on the side. I've made sure to get everything here at the side of Santa's face. But although we've got some nice fluff going, my stitches are very clearly visible, and this isn't as good as this, where you just see fluff, not individual stitches. That means we need to keep going. I have started a new length of thread, and I'm going to start again at the top, working my way downward, although of course you can work bottom up if that makes more sense to you. That's not a particularly important thing about this particular technique. So this is going to have a little more resistance as you continue to add stitches. That's why we are using the number 22 chenille here, because it can go through all of that. And again, there's quite a lot of bulk on the back. So when I'm adding my subsequent layers, I often like to reverse direction on the stitches. So there I just went bottom up, And now I'm going to come up right next to it and then take that next layer, that next stitch top down. This will help reduce the bulk on the back because it's gonna get pretty bulky back here. If I lie this flat, you can see all the distortion that's already come into this from this technique because you're taking this big fatty needle and this chunky thread repeatedly through your piece. You're massing those stitches. So this will need to be given a good pressing once I'm done, but this fluffy, fluffy beard is gonna be worth it. This time around, I'm gonna try and take even longer stitches because the point here is just to build up fluff. And because I've got full coverage with my base layer, I don't need to worry so much about spacing my stitches exactly, making sure that I pick everything up. I'm just trying to add fluff. But I am gonna keep that pattern of staggering my stitches long and short. And sometimes I'm coming up between stitches. Sometimes I'm going to split them. Just do whatever works as you keep going and you keep building. So you can already, I think, see there how adding that second layer of stitches is starting to obscure some of the visible stitches that you could see in the first layer. I'm just gonna pull that in. The other thing you can do is you can just kind of run your nail or your thumb or your finger over it to start fluffing up that thread as you go. And that will also give you a good idea of how you're doing in terms of getting to where you want to be with your super fluffy beard. Yeah, that's already looking much better. So I'm going to continue just going down, down, up, alternating the pattern of my stitches. It also alternates the direction in which the thread is lying, and that can also kind of help your effect here in the second row, in addition to helping you reduce the bulk on the back, because yeah, you're going to really feel this as you get into this stage, how much thread and stitching you're going through front and back. It's a lot, but you really do need to build your beard up for best effect. And then keep your stitches long, stagger them, and try and follow the general shape. So I'm going to continue going back over my base layer, and then I'll show you what the second layer looks like. Okay, so that's my second layer done, and you can see how much better that's looking. The individual stitches aren't as distinct. We're getting some good fluff, also lots of distortion. This definitely needs to be ironed after the fact, but that's okay. It'll come right out once it's pressed. And that looks pretty good. That's pretty fluffy. That's pretty sparkly. Adding those longer stitches on top is helping you get that more just fluffy, sparkle, fun look. However, I want even more. So I'm not going to do a full third layer. I want to get to this like super bulky. You can see the little filaments, super fluff, very uniform where you can hardly see the individual stitches at all. So we're going for layer number 3, although this won't be a full layer. I'm just going to add in stitches where I think they'll help the effect. So I'm not going full coverage, and I'm going to keep my stitches super long. And you're going to have to pull a little here because at this point, there's a whole lot of thread on front and back, and you're going to be going through a lot every time you bring your needle up and down, but it's these extra stitches that I think really get it into full fluff territory, and that's really what I'm going for. I'm Ariel from The Little Mermaid. I want more. I want all the fluff, I want all the sparkle, and we'll see how these extra stitches, annoying as they are to work, are really going to add to our finished result here. And then again, keep them as long as possible because that's what's going to help you see quality of this thread, the extra filaments that are blended into the fake woolly stuff. This is 60% polyamide, 40% viscose, so some kind of synthetic. I don't really know what that is, but it's sparkly, it's fluffy, it's fun. It's perfect for Santa beards and anything else that you want to be fluffy and sparkly where you've got a good area to work with. Because as I have mentioned multiple times in this tutorial, this works less well over short areas. A nice big Santa beard is perfection for this technique. And I think you can probably see how much I'm really having to push and pull here. But look at that. Look at that. See what that's adding there? And then also, one thing I haven't mentioned, make sure you focus around the edges. That's where you tend to have the least coverage. You need a little extra help. So just make sure that you're getting plenty of fluff and sparkle and long stitches in there to finish off your beard. So I'm gonna stay on camera for the full working of my third layer just so you can get a sense of how this isn't full coverage and how long my stitches are. So this is very much a feel it out process, trying to decide just how much you need and where. And I'll show you the very final steps. So if you've been watching, you can see just how much longer these stitches are than the ones previous, and that's really what you want here. Keep it long because you're helping to obscure the previous stitches, which gives you this more uniform and fluffy effect, although that's too long and in the wrong direction. It's coming out into Santa's coat. So I'm gonna redo that. It's okay to add the occasional short stitch if that's what you need for a direction change. Of course, now it doesn't want to rethread naturally. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little shorter there and then in, and that should pull it in. Ah, much better, much better. But I still do want another long stitch going up there. So I'm gonna come back down, back up, that is, down. I'm just going to keep on going until I reach the end of this thread because honestly, why waste good fuzzy stuff? And more sparkle, more fuzzy, more fun. Those are all good qualities in my world. And one place where it's a little sparse is right here at the top. So that's where I'm going to focus my efforts with my final stitches. If you are a puller, somebody who really, yanks your thread, you should probably be doing this in a hoop or a frame so that you don't compress your fabric. I'm very used to working in hand. I've done this before and I know how hard I can pull. So I'm fine to work in hand here, but if you know that about yourself, then make sure that you are counteracting that with some kind of stabilizing structure so that you don't end up with a Santa who is just, a big mess. That'd be bad. You don't want to waste all your work here. Yeah. See, this is why we use the chenille. It's really struggling at this point because I've got so much stitching there, but you know what? It's gonna make for such a great beard. It's totally worth a little extra effort and yeah, some Really gotta push that through, man. That's when you know that you are at peak beard awesomeness. So yeah, still looking a little sparse there over on the side. So that's where I'm gonna add just a few more stitches. We're almost at the end here. Oh, is that awesome or what? So I'm going to end my thread. Again, just by running it in a couple of directions. You've got plenty here on the back to bury that in, not a problem at all. And then I'm just gonna quick go and press this out so you can see the finished effect. Okay, much better. You can see how I've still got just a little bit of distortion here, but that's fine. This guy's gonna be laced on mat board just like my other one, so not a problem. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna fluff this up. So if you run your nail and your finger over it, it'll kind of pull up those little metallic filaments that are in the fuzzy stuff. So just give your beard a nice little fluffing to finish it off. Doesn't that look amazing? So that is the tutorial on giving your Prairie Schooler Santa or any other Santa or anything that you want some nice sparkly fluffiness, a fabulous fluffy beard. I hope this has been helpful to you. And until I see you again, happy stitching.